So it's been an intense day. I've been asking God for a deeper level of intimacy, and I think that part of asking for a greater nearness of God is a greater temptation from evil. And it's kind of like when Jesus went to fast for 40 days, he, at the end of that, encountered Satan who tempted him, and Jesus had to make it through that before his ministry could begin. And so I think in trying to have a greater intimacy with God, I first have to make it through some temptations, and the intensity of those will grow and just become more obvious. And the closer I want to get to God, the more darkness in me is exposed, kind of like I'm pressing in, but I know that I can't get there unless he puts holiness into me. And so it's just breaking down more and more of my own pride and my own self-will, and just crying out to him and saying, I can't do this unless you put this in me. I so badly want to be holy, but I know that you're glorified by my weaknesses, and I need to be humble, and I can't be taking any sort of credit for this for myself, and I can't be self-righteous in this. So if I were able to be holy in my own strength, then I'd be looking down on all the people who just aren't strong enough. And so it takes me to a place of brokenness and saying, God, I keep on trying, and I want so badly to be perfect and to be holy, and just by negligence or by ignorance or by, just there's so many little ways of being unholy in every moment. And it's even, wasting words. I'm wasting words, that's unholy. I'm wasting the life God gives, that's unholy. I'm being greedy, that's unholy. And it's like the closer I want to get to God, the more he reveals just how, filthy and sinful I am. And it also reveals his grace in that, and his glory through his grace. And I'm just so more and more thankful for who he is, and more gracious towards other people as I realize how impossible holiness is and how desperately I need him personally. And so in this walk of trying to, calling out to Jesus, I want to be holy. I want so much to be holy. You said be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect, and I have tried. And there are so many ways that I am imperfect, so many times, and I actually feel a great deal of shame over the way that my life is. Like, I have an incredibly imperfect marriage that is literally broken, and I have very difficult parent-to-child situations, and I just have a very broken family life that I'm not proud of. And although a lot of that came through my own sin, and a lot of that has worked brokenness into me, and been used for God's glory in that way, in taking what would the word be? I guess self-righteousness, taking the self-righteousness out of me, where I have a very high standard for myself, and then I hold other people to that standard even though I can't even keep it myself. And so in some ways it's as though my own life has been so imperfect and broken to show me that I need Jesus, and I need to cut out the self-righteous attitude and just be like, I'm a mess and I can't do this. And I really, really, really just need to humble myself and say, Jesus, I can't do this every day. It's a new struggle and a new thing that confronts me, that I'm just so darkened and unholy, and it's just taking me to a place of humility, which I think is super important, because you have to be humble to receive the grace of God, and you need the grace of God to see God's glory, and it all comes back to praising Him. Yeah. And so today I've just been totally felt so wiped, like, because I have been crying out to God, take me closer and tear down the boxes that I've tried to put you in. I really want to know you. I want to stop analyzing you, because I'm very much like, I don't want to feel things. I want to take a step back from my feelings and analyze the feelings. It's like, if I experience something, I know that I'll have a feeling about that, but instead of experiencing the feeling, I take a step back from it and look at it and evaluate what it is and where it came from. And so I treat Jesus that way as well, where He'll reveal something to me about who He is and His character, or try to take me into a new level of intimacy, and I'll take a step back and analyze it. And it's kind of like somebody comes forward to hug you, and you sort of like stand back and look at them, and you're like trying to size them up, and like, it's not exactly helpful to a relationship to be super analytical. And I feel as though I've been that way in my relationships with people as well. By God's grace, not so much with my children, which I can be much more openly intimate with, and hug them and chase them around and tell them I love them and all of these things. But for the most part, with people, I have very guarded intimacy where I sort of analyze the relationship instead of experience it. And so I've been talking to God about that, and I'm like, I don't want to analyze you, I want to know you. And that request has been wreaking havoc on my entire person, and it's like wiped me out mentally and spiritually and physically, because it's like the attack comes on a lot stronger and is much more evident from the enemy, from Satan. He doesn't want that nearness to God, and I have to press through those growing intensity of temptations in order to get to that intimacy with God. So, for example, like, I'm constantly being propositioned to literally leave God and go into occult. Like that's a dramatic shift, and you'd be like, how could that be possible? But that's literally a temptation that's constantly barraging me. It's like, I don't know how to explain it. It's like I can feel the draw of evil in me, and it's like, how is this even here? And I mourn it, and it's like, God, I can't believe that this is here. And it comes from a desire to control, and a desire for comfort and ease and curiosity and power. You want to know more. You want to know the secrets of the world, that the spiritual world. And sometimes it's like, well, God doesn't give enough answers, and He doesn't give enough power, and He doesn't give you enough control, and if you come over and work for us, we'll give you answers and power and control and that kind of things. And these are the temptations that come at me, and they're real. I actually like, I don't exactly often say this, and this is the first time I've ever told anybody this, because these things, I have these kind of encounters frequently, and I don't talk to people about them because there's very few people that you can talk to about them. And so in this particular situation, I was talking to somebody, and as I was talking to them, the things that they were saying were incredibly, like, disgustingly blasphemous. Like, disgustingly blasphemous. And I was like, well, that's a demon right there. And so I called it out. I was like, well, okay, demon of such and such, like, demon of this person, you're being really nasty right now. And it starts talking to me, and, like, the demon starts talking to me through this person. And it's telling me who it is and what its role is. And it's telling me that it says, join me and you'll see real progress mankind will see for the rest of humanity. And it's like, these are the kind of temptations that come at me. It's like they want to give you power and control, and they know your heart and the things that you desire. And it's like, if you're a person who wishes that, you know, you could have some sort of meaningful impact on the world, then they say, well, come over here and we'll make sure you're remembered forever. And it's like, those are the real temptations that come at me. And I not only hear them in my thoughts, but I've had them spoken to me through a person. These exact things, like, and I have to press through those and keep on saying, no, Jesus is beautiful. Jesus is beautiful. I can't leave him. And then I'll say something like, I don't have a heart to do the things that I'd have to do if I were to go into the occult. It's like, I know what it's all about. I know that it's all about, you know, to get deep into it, you've got to do really terrible things, and I just don't have the heart to do that. And I couldn't do it if I wanted to. And I couldn't live with myself if I were to get into those things. And then they would respond to that by being like, well, we can change your heart. We can give you the cold heart that you need. And I'm like, am I really having this conversation right now? Like, what? Yeah. Anyways, I'm just being very real about the spiritual battles that I go through, and they're very draining to me, and barrage me physically as well. Last night, I woke up at 2:30 a.m. and I could not sleep again. I just lay there, and I could feel like an evil spirit right near me, hovering over me almost. That was the sensation anyways, that it was hovering over me, and it was very close. But I wasn't scared at all. It was just there, and it was interacting with me. And the interaction is sort of difficult to put into words, because it's kind of like feelings and thoughts. Like the feelings and thoughts you would have before making a sentence, and then you'd try to make a sentence to turn it into something that can be understood. And so it's sort of like that interaction that happens before words. And so we're somehow having this interaction with each other that doesn't have specific words, but is understood. So to try and put it into words, the idea it's getting across is that it wants to be intimate with me. Like, it's trying to coach me, the spirit, this evil spirit is trying to coach me into how to be intimate with it and how to let it in. And I'm like, it's actually trying to tempt me to go through with this. And there is like a evil passion in a person that wants that. It's like stirring up some sort of desire in me, and it's sort of like a gut level desire. It's like you want to say yes and let it in and try it out. And so by the grace of God, I sort of wrestled with this until 8 in the morning. Yeah, 2:30 at night till 8 in the morning. I could not sleep. I just lay there, wrestling with some sort of spirit trying to interact with me, trying to get me to let it in, to be intimate with my spirit. And I don't exactly know how to explain that in a way that makes sense. But it was sort of felt in a nonverbal way. And it just made me tired all day. Not just from staying up in the middle of the night, but also just trying to turn to Jesus and be like, Jesus, I'm sorry for even thinking this, for even considering it. Help me. I can't do this. I need you. And so I put on worship music and I was just worshiping, and that is the very real experiences that I have recently. I mean, there's previous ones that I may at some point share, because this has become something of a regular part of my life. Because when you start interacting with the spiritual world, there's God and Jesus. I mean, God who is Jesus and the Holy Spirit. And then there's also demons. And you want to interact with Jesus, then you're also going to be interacting with evil as well. And that's my most recent experience from last night. And they've also, I feel as though my thoughts are being willfully scattered so that I can't collect them and focus. And I have to work really hard to get a hold of a thought. And I'm like just trying to breathe through every moment to stay focused on the task at hand as well as on God. Because it's just, there's such a tension in me about the eternal soul, and it's with me constantly. So I'm constantly in communication with God, praising Him and calling out to Him and praying, and also being barraged by evil spirits to come and join them and leave God or whatever it is that they're trying to get me on at that exact moment. But it is exhausting, and I have just been crying out to God, clear my mind, help me to focus. How am I going to be able to do your work if I have no capacity to carry a train of thought? It's like, clearly I can have a conversation and discuss what's going on, but Jesus talked about the seeds that landed on different paths, and one seed landed on a hard path and a bird came and picked it up. Sometimes it feels like that's what my thoughts are. They're on hard paths and they're just getting plucked up. And it's so hard to pick what's important and focus on it and press into that. And I feel like I'm being willfully scattered and distracted to keep me from being able to do meaningful work on the earth. And so right now my prayer has just been, Jesus, I cannot do this without you. I can't be holy without you. I can't serve you without you. Like, I want so badly to be everything that you want me to be and to delight you and to feed your sheep. Like he said, if you love me, feed my sheep and care for my lambs. And it's like, Jesus, I'm so consumed with my own problems that I can't do these things that I need to be doing. And I really want to listen to you, and I want to do the Great Commission, and I want to reach the broken and hurting with my own brokenness and hurting answer. I mean, the answer that I have within my own brokenness and hurting, which is you, Jesus. The answer is you. And just coming to you in brokenness and saying, I need you. I need you every day. Every minute, I need you. And so that's been my prayer as well, that I just need to be able to focus and get my thoughts in line so that I can not be so self-centered and carry out whatever task God would have me do on the earth. And sometimes I'm like, don't send me to the earth without knowing what I'm supposed to do. It's like he put me here, and if I belong to his kingdom and he's my king, then I want to know what I'm supposed to do. What's my role here? I don't want to live for myself. I want to live for him and for what he's looking for from me. But I can't do that so long as I'm consumed with myself and my own struggles. So that has been my recent struggle, my recent spiritual encounters, and, my prayers. So I suppose I shall finish this off with a prayer for myself and for you. Jesus, it's all about you, and I want to keep my eyes fixed on you. I know that there's wind and waves all around, and life is filled with these things that are the wind and the waves, and I just need to keep my eyes on you. And Lord, we want to be holy, and we want to please you, and we can't do this unless your Holy Spirit does that work in us, that work of purifying us and teaching us. And Lord, I pray for every scattered mind that you would give it clarity, and broken hearts that you'd give them healing, and put our eyes on the lost and those that you want us to reach out to, and give us a heart for them and eyes for them, and take our eyes off of ourselves, and forgive us, Lord Jesus, for greed and materialism and self-will and self-righteousness. And God, I just pray that you would send laborers into the vineyard, and I so badly want to be one of those laborers, but I'm consumed with myself, and I'm so scattered myself, and I'm so broken myself, and I just really need your Spirit to work in me in order to do your work. You asked me to feed your sheep and care for your lambs. You tell us to go out and prophesy and heal the sick, and you ask us to do things that are impossible for us to do without you. You ask us to be holy, which is also impossible for us to do without your Spirit. So I just pray that you pour out a spirit of holiness and a spirit of prayer and a spirit of humility. This is what I ask for, Jesus. We need you, and we love you. Amen. So a number of times many times over the last year, I have set out to write out my testimony so that I could share it, and never got it done because I'm trying to make it perfect. So I am just going to try as best as I can to just go forward with it and get it done. And I'm just going to pray and ask that God would give me the words to say and the remembrance of what needs to be said. So, Jesus, I'd like to share the story of how I met you and how you've been with me and guiding me all this way. And I pray that you would give me the words to say and help me to remember the story as it happened and the elements that need to be included. I pray that you would just direct this entire conversation and just be here and present in the words. And I pray that your Spirit is able to speak through me, and I pray that you work through me on the hearts of those who see this video. Give them receptive ears to hear. Jesus, I ask that, you speak through me, through the work that you've done in me. Amen. Great. Now, as I said, I have tried to write this out a number of times, and it just gets so complicated because there's so much to include. And so I'm just going to try to really just explain it as best as I can, as though I'm having a conversation. I strayed away from following God when it was very gradual. I didn't even notice it was happening at all. I thought that I was following God all along. I became a New Age spiritualist. I didn't even call myself a Christian anymore. I had been asked by somebody in a conversation, they were talking to me about what I believed, and they were like, so would you call yourself a Christian? I said, no, I wouldn't call myself a Christian. I am a universalist, spiritualist, humanist. Those were the exact words that I used. So I still believed in God, and I was a universalist, so I believed that Christianity didn't have it quite right, that God was expressed in many ways, and we didn't really understand who God was very well, and it was more significant to do the things that God wanted and to find out what it is that God wanted you to do and live a life that was pretty close to what he was wanting. And that's what was important in life, to live within the structure that he created in order to have a healthy life. And I thought that there was only healthy and hurtful, and I didn't really consider, good and evil and the spiritual dimensions to good and evil. I just thought there was healthy and unhealthy and a natural order that God had designed into the universe, and if we could figure out what the natural order was and follow that, then we would be able to have a good life. And that was the purpose of life, to be able to lead others into following that natural order and into the going towards health instead of harm. And it didn't need to involve Jesus. It just needed to involve knowing what it was that God wanted you to do. So I believed that many religions could have elements of what's right because maybe they're expressing God in another way. And so it was a very gradual shift into this belief. I had grown up as a missionary's kid in Papua New Guinea. I moved to the Philippines when I was 4 months old with my family. It was a family of 4 kids at that time. I was the 4th. And then spent the next years of my life until I was 4 years old in Papua New Guinea, where I learned to speak the language there. I still have very vague memories from my childhood in Papua New Guinea before turning 4 years old. Actually, a couple of vivid memories, but they don't really fit into the context of this particular conversation. So when I was 5, we came to Canada, spent a year here. I also remembered being here and many of the things that we did here. Visiting my grandparents, visiting a kids camp that my parents went and were helping do some building there. Traveling across Canada in a camper van. By this time, my mom was pregnant and she had my youngest sister on this furlough, and so there's a family of 6 of us missionary kids in Papua New Guinea. We were called pickaninnies, little kids. So there were 6 little pickaninnies, and we traveled across Canada that year in a camper van to partly speak at churches about the work that we were doing in Papua New Guinea to raise support. And then we went back over for another 4 years. And so I lived in Papua New Guinea until I was 8 years old. And I remember from the time I was very young, like kindergarten, first grade age, I always had a sense that there was God and he was watching. So as long as I can remember, I have always felt watched. Like, I think I've had just the spiritual sensitivity to the presence of God and the knowledge that I'm being observed, and not necessarily known who it was. Like, I remember specifically in about first grade on the bus, I was just learning to read, and I was thinking about the words in my head, and I was imagining the words above my head like a thought bubble, and the question came into my mind, how many people can see my thoughts? Or who is able to see my thoughts? And I just had an awareness of a dimension outside of the physical, and, from a very young age, was sensitive to the fact that God is present and watching. And I think that he put a tender heart in me and a sensitive conscience. I remember I became a very bad liar. Like, I was lying constantly, almost for no reason, when I was about 6 to 7 years old. I just, I'd blame it on somebody else, and I knew I was lying, but I just didn't. I just, what's the difference between truth and a lie? I'll just lie if I can get away with it. And I knew that I was lying, and I just kept on going with it, and people knew that I was a liar too as a little kid. And so one day my mom takes me aside, and my older brother is there as well, and my brother says to me, every time you lie, it's going to take 1,000 truths for people to believe you. I was 7 years old, and I remember him saying this, and as a 7-year-old, I thought, I won't be able to tell 1,000 truths in my life, so I better make sure that I don't lie. And since that time, I have been very sensitive to the things that I'm saying, to make sure that I'm not saying something that's inaccurate, and even double checking before I speak to be sure that I'm explaining a situation well enough that somebody can't even think that I was trying to deceive them. So even not lying by omission. So I've been quite sensitive to integrity, and I think that God was working that in me, and that tender conscience in me, and the ability to hear something and think it through and change my ways if my ways need to be changed. And also a core of strength in me that I'm like, I am going to stick to what I firmly believe. And that's also created the perception that I'm very hard-headed, and to some extent I am, because I hold very strongly to my convictions. And I can be spoken to and spoken into, but I don't just listen just because I'm told to listen. But anyways, this is the conscience and heart that God was building into me growing up as a child. And so I did grow into the, knowledge of God and the knowledge of Christ. And I remember I used to go to church, and I thought church was a good time to pretend that your hands are dinosaurs and you're okay. This is one thing I used to play, that the dinosaur was a rock, and it had magically been turned into a rock, and it was slowly coming to life, and then as it came to life, it discovered that it had a long lost friend that had also been turned into a rock. Anyways, that's what church was good for, and watching bumblebees and stuff when I was about 6 years old. And then as I became 7 or 8, I started to realize, wait a minute, these guys are saying some interesting stuff. And so I actually started to pay attention to the words of the message of God. And I was like, oh, this is interesting stuff. I don't necessarily specifically remember what I found interesting. I just remember that for once I was looking forward to going to church for what was being said. And I also liked church for the craft supplies, because you'd go to kids' church and there's all these craft supplies. So that's another thing that church was good for as a child. But I was about 10 years old. I went to a kids' summer camp in California. And while we were there, the speaker was talking about the prodigal son and explaining the heart of the Father, and saying that God is a real Father, and He is with you always. Whatever you're doing, you can be conscious of His presence and know that He's there. You're playing your sport, He's there watching you, and you can just turn to Him and see Him there watching you. And at night when you're going to bed, you can crawl into His arms and fall asleep in His arms. And that really sat with me my entire life since that time as a 10-year-old, and that's when I saw God as my Father. And from that time I never stopped seeing God as my Father. So even when I was going into universalism and New Age and humanism, I still considered God my Father, and I just wanted to know who He was, really. And I just regularly did that sort of meditative practice, where I'd be going to bed and I'd be crawling into my Father's arms and fall asleep that way. And I think that it preserved a lot of my resilience and innocence and tenderness through life, that being able to be a child in God's arms. And how did I start to stray from God and from Jesus? In high school, I was super passionate about the gospel and about it's so significant to life, and I want to be an evangelist, and I want to reach my peers with the gospel of Christ, but I didn't know what it was or how to share it or what to say or how it had impacted my own life, so I really didn't know what the gospel was, and didn't even know how to broach the topic with other people in a way that they could hear it. And I didn't even know how it was supposed to be impacting my own life. So there were a lot of unknowns about the gospel and what it was and what it was supposed to mean to me in my own life. I actually used to, in high school, I loved prayer meeting so much that if my parents left me at home when they were headed to prayer meeting, I actually got on a bike and biked to prayer meeting. And we lived out in the country, so it wasn't just like up the street. I really loved prayer meeting, and so I'd go out of my way to get there. And actually one day at a prayer meeting, somebody who's not often there and doesn't go to the church that we were going to came, and they spoke to me, and they, said prophetically that I was going to be an evangelist. And they didn't even know that it was on my heart to share the gospel. And so I was like, maybe I will be an evangelist. maybe this is like God's put this on my heart and this is what I'm supposed to do with my life. But then after high school, I got married and I had kids and I had a house, I had a job. My husband had a job, we had 2 cars, we had a yard, we had a dog and a cat. We had like the ideal life. I was only 21 and I already had all these things. We each had a job, we each had 2 cars, we had our own house and mortgage and yard. It was fixed up exactly how I wanted it because my dad and grandpa and brother worked on it and made it exactly how I wanted it to be. It even had like a jetted 2-person tub and a jacuzzi tub and hardwood floors and my own chosen and custom made kitchen. So it was like a dream for a 21-year-old to have all these things. And it just wasn't good enough for me. Like, there's a wickedness in a person's heart where nothing's going to satisfy you, nothing, even if it's perfect or super wonderful and a beautiful blessing from God. So this is the part where I'll get into kind of my heart's story. Like, there's this outward part where I'm at school wanting to be an evangelist, wanting to reach people, and then there's also what's going on in my heart during this time. And in high school, starting around, I'm trying to think of the age, it was around 14, 15, between 14 and 15, I started like entering a really dark place in my heart, like just depression and constant suicidal thoughts. And I was like, I haven't really ever told anybody this, but I'd take a mirror shard and I'd scrape my stomach with it. Like I was cutting I believe at that time I was 15, 16, but I just had so much anguish in my spirit. I needed to express the anger. And well, it wasn't even anger, it was just anguish. And I didn't need anybody to see it. I didn't want anybody to see it. I wanted to keep, because I'm very proud and I want to keep an outward appearance of perfection. And so I've got to deal with these personal issues privately. And so I would deal with this, maybe it was anger, maybe there was anger in there, but I'd deal with this intense turmoil eventually by running. I'd just put on my running shoes and I'd book it out the back door when I started to feel this intense emotion. Book it out the back door and I'd run laps. I'd just run laps until I couldn't feel anything. And I just imagined that my pain was behind me and I was running away from it, and I could run until I left it behind. And I just loved the burn in my stomach from running my pain away. And that was how I managed that. But the anger and the pain still followed me wherever I went. And I wanted to find solutions to it. I wanted to find some kind of solution to this turmoil within me. And I wasn't finding that answer in God. And I got married and had kids, and this was still following me everywhere that I went. I was pregnant and it was getting even worse. I had my daughter and it was just as bad. And suicidal thoughts were like pretty serious. I had plans of how I would do it. It was like, in a blizzard, I'm gonna walk out into a field without a jacket, and if I go far enough, then I won't be able to make it back before I survive this. So it's a very realistic way to kill yourself. But then there's the thought, what if I actually do turn around and I make it back and I actually just end up losing my fingers and toes? And it doesn't work. So there's that really kept me from doing it. And yeah, just worrying that it won't work and it will hurt too bad. So there was a lot of anguish and turmoil in me that I wanted to find some kind of solution for, and I was not finding that solution in God or in a personal relationship with Him. And I had been looking for it in all sorts of outside sources and was not finding it. And there was such turmoil in my relationship, partly because of my own high standards that my own high personal standards that I have for myself and am not able to keep, I also put those on other people and expect them to be able to keep them. So part of this turmoil in my relationship is my demands for perfection and my own pride, that I want my family to look perfect and it's not looking perfect, and this is going to cause issues. So a lot of the issues is my pride and my inner turmoil, and trying to find, what would it be, like a formula. Instead of engaging in a relationship as a relationship, I break it down into a formula, and I'm like, if I do exactly the right things and say exactly the right things, then I'm sure that this is going to become perfect. I'll be able to hack this, have an example of a perfect life and a perfect marriage if I can hack it and read the right books, read the right, take the right courses. If I do everything perfectly, A plus B should equal C. We're going to have a perfect relationship. We're going to have a perfect marriage. I'm going to have a perfect family, and I'll be an example of perfection, just like I have to be, because I'm super proud. And that's my heart and where I was. I did not have a relationship with God, even though I still called God my father and was going to church, and I thought that I wanted to get into mission work, and I thought that I wanted to, do evangelism, and that was in high school. Then I got married, and I was sort of starting to go away from the evangelism thing and be like, wonder, I could just serve God here. I could just, we'll just put that concept on the back burner. And I started working in social services, and I was working with people who had similar struggles to me, like young people who had similar struggles to me, but theirs were much more outward expressed and mine were very hidden, and I didn't really want them expressed because I wanted to deal with these myself. And as I saw them struggling with these issues and struggling with them myself, I had to find answers. I was like, I need to find an answer for myself. I need to find an answer for these people that I'm working with. There has to be some sort of solution to this deep soul problem. And so I went to trainings and seminars for social services. And I went to suicide prevention seminars and workshops and things like this. And I decided that the solution was to create a self-discovery program, so that would have like an independent living program that would have self-discovery exercises, because I decided that the problem was purpose. That if you had a sense of purpose in your life, you would be able to, feel like your life is worth living. And so the problem to this emptiness of soul is not having purpose. And so I was like, well, then we need to do self-discovery activities so that they can find out what their purpose is, and independent living skills so that they have the budgeting and time management skills in order to fulfill their purpose. So this was the solution I'd come up with through my trainings, and I decided to pursue creating this self-discovery program. I've got to confess right now that I just stopped taking this video so that I could close my eyes and pray, because the thoughts were not coming through very clearly. And as I closed my eyes, like right now as I'm videoing this, I have it in the camera that's facing me so that I can see my face. And as I closed my eyes to pray, I saw like my face staring at me, and it looked really evil. It was like I could see some sort of evilness in my eyes. And of course, being who I am, I'm not like surprised or startled by it. I'm just analyzing it, and I'm like, what is this? Why do I close my eyes and see like a certain, spirit coming out of my eyes and just staring at me, and it's me looking at me. And I'm like, what is this? And I'm honestly not sure. And it could be vanity. I'm thinking it might be vanity. It might be like the wickedness of loving to see my own face. That's a possibility. But I am just going to stop right now a minute and try to deal with whatever I just saw. And deal with it, of course, by prayer. Jesus, you know my heart. You know every unexplored part of me, the parts that I try to ignore and neglect and brush over. And you know what is unholy in me. And I just pray that you bring that to the surface and convict me of it and change my heart, Lord, to be like you. Give me the sensitivity to your spirit that I need to have in order to follow you. I pray that whatever wickedness is in me, whatever evil spirits could be working on me, I pray that you silence them and that you allow your work to be done through me. Lord, I pray for my own vanity, Lord, that I won't be consumed by my self-image, what I think people see of me and what I see of myself. I pray that I would have eyes that see like you see. So I just pray for whatever this strange image was that I saw when I closed my eyes, to pray for being able to continue with this video. God, I just pray that you continue to work with me on holiness. And forgive me for my own vanity and self-image. Amen. Jesus, thank you for the work that you did in my life. I pray that you give me wisdom as I share this story. And I know that I am not able to speak you into people's lives. I know that your spirit has to explicitly encounter a person. I can't, by words alone, do what your spirit has to do. So, Lord, I just pray that through my words, your spirit is able to work. And that's my prayer, that you use the testimony of you, the testimony of Christ. It says in Revelations that they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. So I have overcome by the blood of the Lamb, and this is the word of my testimony. And I pray that you are able to use this testimony for your glory. So, now that I took a moment to pause and pray, I am going to try to continue with this story. So I thought that the issue with a person's soul, what caused desire for suicide and cutting and the internal anguish, was a lack of purpose. I thought that if you created enough systems in a person's life and dealt with all the external needs that a person was struggling with, they wouldn't have this internal turmoil. If all their external needs were cared for, the internal turmoil would go away. And that's involved a lot of no need for God, really, no need for Jesus. You just needed to get things arranged properly on the outside. You needed the right kind of counseling, you needed the right kind of medication, you needed the right kind of routine and training, and you needed the right kind of living circumstance, and then your inner turmoil would be satisfied. And there was no real need for Jesus in this equation at all. And maybe there is need for some spirituality, because you needed God in order to tell what is healthy and unhealthy, because God's standard is what's healthy. So that was the extent of what I believed God was for. And later on into this, I also like once I started advancing further into this mindset, I started to get a little bit weird, like spiritual weird. Like like when you die, you are like a strong light or a less strong light, and those lights can be perceived by spiritually perceptive people. So this is the part where I started to become quite new age, which was later on at about 26, 27. Now this part, when I'm creating this independent living program, I'm about 22, 23. And this is also before I've gone to university. So at this stage, I am definitely straying away from the need for Jesus and saying that it's formulas and systems. And it was only later that I realized that these formulas and systems are like trying to live at peace in a haunted house. It's like the turmoil inside you is a spiritual turmoil, and you can arrange things around the spiritual turmoil, but it's like as long as a house is haunted, it's going to take a lot of arranging to try and live at peace in that house. And so no amount of counseling or medication or external arranging, there's nothing external that is going to solve this problem. And I had not come to this realization at all. At this time, I'm 23, 24, and I'm thinking that this is the solution. And if I can get this figured out, I'll solve my own problems, and I'll have this program in order to give to other people so that they can solve their problem. And there's no need for Jesus, really. There's possibly a need for spirituality. You should be connected to God so that you can have an understanding of what's healthy and unhealthy. And that's essentially how I strayed away from Jesus and knowing who he is, or needing to have him in your life personally or anything like that. And I also, at this time, I don't think that I believed that there was a hell, really. No, I didn't really want to think about that. I sort of just, it didn't enter the equation that I felt like thinking about. So I just believed, according to the story of the parable that Jesus tells of the wheat and the tares, that we're living in a world where there's wheat and weeds, and the weeds will go into the fire, but the weeds aren't really people. They're just demons and the devil, and it's not going to be people. Because for no real good reason, I just wanted to believe whatever I wanted to believe, and I hadn't really wanted to think about that at all. Yes, and so there's all sorts of, during this time, relational conflict going on. Like, my husband and I are together, and then we split up. And during our first split, we stay in the same town, and then we get back together. And, I had done a 21-day Daniel fast and then added 3 more days on top of it after that. And it was at the end of that time that he moved back in. So all this time, even though I was really straying from the truth of Jesus, I was still fasting and calling out to God and considered God my Father. And it was still like terrible turmoil in my relationship. And within about another year, we split up. I moved to Thunder Bay. I went to university there for a year, where I was further entrenched into humanism and human answers and the goodness in humankind and the light inside and all of this sort of very humanistic stuff. And I'm such a different person now. Anyways, I was just thinking about who I was then. Yes, it's interesting thinking back. So I was in Thunder Bay, and I still wanted to hear from God. I was like, God, something's not right. Something's not right. And I just know that I'm not hearing from him. And he just feels completely silent. And I'm out here away from my husband and straying from the truth of Jesus and going to university and this sort of stuff. And it's like, why can't I hear you, God? Why can't I hear you? I know that there is something missing here, and my communion with you is not there. Why aren't you answering me? And I felt terribly lost. Like, I didn't know which way to go. And I thought that maybe it was because I was separated from my husband. Maybe God wasn't speaking to me because I wasn't with my husband. So I tried to work out a way to get back together with him. And I did end up moving in with him again, and we were living together. And I was going further and further and further into this kind of new age belief thing, as I was saying. As I got older, it got a little weird. And, the sort of... I didn't know the exact terminology, but it was like the ascended master concept of Jesus, where he was a great example for us. And he was, if spirits were bright lights that could come and visit us, then he was the brightest type of light. And he died in order to be able to send his bright light for us. And so, like, all this weird stuff that I don't even know exactly where it came from. I must have picked it up along the way, who knows where. And yeah, I was just, with all the relational conflict and the family conflict and my own inner turmoil involving not hearing God and feeling as though I'm no longer hearing from God. I feel as though I've got spirits all around me, and I don't know how to interpret any of what's going on. And I was just a mess. Like, I was a wreck. To explain it a bit, I kept my house as a disaster. I was terribly lonely. It's like I had 2 children and 1 new son, and my husband would leave for work at 7 in the morning, and then after work he'd have another job, so he wouldn't be back until 9 at night. And I had no friends in the city, and I had no vehicle or way of getting around, and I was in conflict with my family, so I wasn't getting along with them either. So I was terribly isolated and lonely, and this pain in my spirit was getting worse and worse. And this strange belief system was sort of like warping my perception of reality even. And yeah, it tormented me. It like tormented me in a way that would make my entire body shake and like make my palms sweat and keep me awake for 7 days on end. Like, literally, I stayed awake 7 days at least on end. I slept for an hour, then I stayed awake another 5 days on end, and it was just from this turmoil in my spirit. And I was planning on leaving my husband at that time because things were so intensely escalated between us, and we would yell at each other. I'd swear at him. I punched holes in walls. I threw a toothbrush once and broke our TV. And where I was personally, my husband and I would switch off between weekends, where he would get drunk one weekend, I would get drunk another weekend, and I was watching just foul movies. Like, what's an example? I was watching Archer. I was watching Shameless. These are movies that I would never watch now. And I was just lost and feeling so terribly broken. And I wasn't even sure if I was doing the right thing leaving my husband again. I was like, God, I can't hear from you now. If I leave, am I still not going to hear from you? I don't know what's going on. Why can't I hear you? Why can't I hear you? And what's the truth? And who are you? And all this stuff all at once. And so I decided that the only thing I can do is fast. So I have now been awake 7 days, and then I've slept a few hours, and then I've been awake another 5 or 6 days, and I just have so much energy inside of me, like, that I can't sleep, and I pace, and I think, and I talk to myself, and yeah, that's where I was at. And so I was like, I don't know what to do with all of this. So I fasted for 3 days, and on the last day that I was going to be ending this fast, I was also going to be leaving my husband, and he was away for the weekend, and he knew that this was coming, and I knew that this was coming, and this was a planned thing. And it was that weekend that I'd finished the fast. I lay back in my bed, and I had, it was like a vision. I closed my eyes, and there was a storm all around me, and Jesus was there standing on the water in this storm, and he says to me, "You're already walking on water in a storm you can't see. Look at me and don't doubt." And so it was at that moment that I realized all this stuff I was believing was rubbish, and that the only answer was Jesus. And it was just instant, like years and years of progressively walking away from Jesus and actually never really knowing Jesus himself, and more like knowing the Father. And suddenly I encounter Jesus, and it's through this vision of him on the waters, and he says this thing to me that the only solution is looking at him and not doubting. And it was instant, just the change in my beliefs. And that didn't change, that my spirit was still being barraged by whatever sorts of spirits were around me, that I was thinking were the dead spirits of other people, and were, guiding lights. Yeah, that's how far into sort of like New Age type beliefs I was getting into. And it was, ruining me. And then, I had the encounter with Jesus, and that instantly changed my beliefs, but I was still incredibly stirred up internally. And yeah, from there, I needed a place to go. I ended up going to, a place that could take people in, that sort of like a refuge. I ended up at this refuge place, right, to sort of, I guess, recover from whatever is going on and get my feet under me. And there, I was still so stirred up, like I couldn't sleep, and these attacks started becoming demonic. And I can explain that as in, like, I'd lie in bed at night, and there'd be like, the attack is like an intense fear that is being put into you, like forced onto you, and also terrifying images. Like, I've never watched horror movies. I can't watch horror movies. But these attacks would involve I'd close my eyes and just see terrifying things, like stuff like flesh being blended, or many, many teeth coming at me. And whatever this was also trying to like force fear into me, like the emotion fear, as though it were a parcel that could be packaged up and put into a person. And so that's when I sort of like started experiencing the core, like the inner person, and what that was. I mean, I'd had a previous experience of the inner person, but this was really starting to engage with that inner person and understanding that life. So this is what's coming up with it. I'm having a really hard time finishing this up, and seriously considering not putting it up at all. And yet, I'll tell you, like, this is the second day that I'm recording, but the night that I was recording previously, I laid down in bed and there was that same intense darkness that had been there in the few months after meeting Jesus. And I was like, oh, I'd almost forgotten what this was like. And I'm not sure, it was like I was telling my testimony and this evil was coming to terrorize me, to try and get me again. And what was it like? And I had almost forgotten what it was like. It's like you want to sleep with the lights on and music and some worship music on so that you can just make it through. And yeah, it's fear and terrifying images, and it's it feels as though it's right near you and could just about grab you. That's what it feels like. And it's telling me it's gonna stop my heart. And so I'm responding to, well, if you have any power, take the breath out of my nose. Because I remember that Jesus, God had breathed life into our nostrils. And so it's like my life is in God's hands. He put my life into me, and so they don't actually have the power to take that out of me. And, there was that intense darkness in the room all night last night. And maybe that's why I'm kind of like on the fence about continuing with this, but it's not as though it's scaring me off from doing it. It goes from keeping me up and wearing me out and trying to scare me to trying to make me feel like there's no point to it and wasting my time. Well, more than wasting my time, but it's not meaningful. There's no reason to do this. And it's stupid, this kind of stuff. So that has been what has happened since recording the first bit of my testimony last night and now. And here I am, trying to finish it up. So I was previously saying that I had encountered Jesus, and when I encountered Jesus, it wasn't as though everything became easy and simple. It's like things that were intense became even more intense. As like previously I had a lot, as I was saying, stirred up in me, where I wasn't sleeping for 7 days. I'd sleep a few hours, I'd stay awake another number of days, and I had no understanding of what this was or the context for it. And then I had this vision of Jesus, and it was just instant that it was like, Jesus is God. Jesus is a spiritual reality. Jesus is present, and he is my only hope. And this was instant. That was all of the realizations that I had. And I also suddenly realized that I had never really known Jesus, and which was surprising to me. And I felt as though if I had died previous to this moment of actually meeting him, he would have said, I didn't know you. So my life was a testimony of not knowing Jesus. Like the way that I was living, it showed that I didn't know him. I was not interested in God's people. I was interested in making a difference in the world and doing good things, but it was very humanistic. And Jesus had to make that call on me. Yeah, that's my own personal belief anyways, that I needed. I had never previously even met him really, and I was much more going by rote although it's evident in my life story that God has been there with me the entire time, working in my spirit to bring me to him this entire time. And I have also been calling out to him, and he's been drawing me. So it's kind of, it starts with him and comes back to praising him because of what he's done in my life. And if I had been able to maintain the perfect life that I had desired, then I never would be able to praise God for changing my heart and changing the way that I lived. I mean, there's the person that I was, it was July, the end of July, it was the long weekend of July, 2016. It was the long weekend of July 2016 that this happened. And if I look back at the person I was previous to that encounter, it's completely different. Like, my entire soul and outlook on life. And there's still factors of my old person that I encounter. Like, I come across anger and depression, and I still struggle at times with suicidal thoughts if things are very bad and I'm getting my eyes off Jesus, because I've got to choose to keep my eyes on Jesus. And then when those come up, then I just, of course, go back to God again and again and again. And I know who he is now, and I have access to more intimacy. And so, as like I was saying, that things were very intense, and I had no context for what it was that was going on that was stirring me up. And then I meet Jesus, and I understand instantly, and things get worse at that point. And suddenly there's an intense darkness in my home, and it's like so much worse than anything that had been stirring me up previous. The stirring up had been like this energy inside that I couldn't sleep, was so worked up. And then suddenly I encountered Jesus, and I'm like, Jesus is the only way. Boom, this is super intense darkness is in my home, and it's just like making my hands sweat, and I don't know what to do. And like, to explain it a bit, that night I was trying to put the kids to bed, and my daughter is telling me I can't sleep. I close my eyes and I see vampires and werewolves, and I'm too scared to sleep. And so I had told her the story about Jesus walking on the water, and that she can keep her eyes on him, and then she fell to sleep right after that. And I knew what she was talking about, because I was getting that same thing where I'd close my eyes and there'd be terrifying images, and it was unexplainable. It was like a blanket, a heavy blanket of humidity, except for it was evil. Like, yeah, it's not easy to explain. But that's what happened that day. And from there I went out, my brother and sister drove me out to a refuge place, and I stayed there. And while I was there, this oppressive darkness followed me, and it was so intense in my room that I didn't sleep with the light off for probably 3 months or more. I kept a lamp on constantly, because if I'd turn off the lights, then there was just so much terror. And it's hard to explain, because it's not rational. It's like sensed on the inner being. And I really developed a sort of in-tunedness or eyes for my inner being and what was going on in me through this. And I had had a few spiritual encounters with God growing up and previous to this, and at different prayer meetings, but there had been nothing like this. And then the intimacy with God, as well came out of this, where I was constantly feeling his presence and knowing that he was my only hope through this. Like, I was surrounded by this terror and oppression, and the only thing that I could do was keep on standing on that rock that was Jesus and going back to him and calling out to him. And it was like the terror was there and it was not going away. And I did keep my lights on, and I did keep headphones in with music in all night. Like, I could not go without listening to worship music constantly and the lights on, in order to make it through this. And that's all that I had to go on. One day while I was at this place, a woman came and she hears voices, and she's sitting at the dinner table with me, and she's like sort of giggling, and then being like, no, like, no, and also laughing at the same time. And I'm talking to her, I lean over and I'm like, are you okay? And she's like, I don't like the voices in my head. And I also had compassion for her, because I have Jesus. Like, if I were going through the oppression and the darkness and this experience without having Jesus, I don't know how I could cope with it at all. I wouldn't be able to. And so I had compassion for this lady who did not have Jesus, but I also didn't really know how to reach her with him. And at the table another day, she's sitting beside me and she's looking over at me, and she's sort of, I know she looks at me and then she snickers and then she looks back at her food, and then she looks at me and she snickers and she looks back at her food. And I'm just like, what is going on here? Are the demons in her seeing something about me that's funny? Like that, and it's bothered me ever since. It still bothers me to this day. It's like, did they see that I'm gonna maybe fall away from God when I'm older and cause a whole bunch of trouble? Did they see that I'm gonna die a terrible death? Are they just laughing because that's just what they do? I don't know. Or maybe because I'm making a mess of my life and am completely missing what I'm supposed to be doing. Anyways, I don't know why they were laughing. But I stopped eating, and I was like looking straight at my plate and watching her laughing at me. And I thought in my mind, I don't know why you're laughing, but I do know that your end is worse than mine. And that was about the only response that I could give. I don't know why you're laughing. Your end is worse than mine. And at that thought, I just thought it. At that thought, this woman completely stops laughing and stands up and leaves the table. And nothing else had happened. I hadn't said anything. So that's one of the many strange encounters I had since meeting Jesus. I'm thinking, did I come across him? No, I didn't really come across him. He came across me. He came after me. So I'm struggling in this place spiritually where I don't know who I can even reach out to and speak. And there's more than that. It's like, who do I reach out to with this and speak to? And who is there that can see through what is going on the outside to what's going on spiritually with me? Who can see through the external experience that I'm having of this and the way that it's showing up outside to what's going on in me in order to help me through this? And so I was quite private about it. Like, I talked sometimes if somebody engaged me in it, and it was very isolating, and I had no idea where to go from there. But within, over 3 months, things started to, I don't even know, I just started to feel more and more the intensity of God's presence, especially when I was worshiping, and slowly I got involved in working, and I was able to work as well, and slowly took on more responsibilities, and they were responsibilities helping people and making meals and cleaning, and my work was suddenly very meaningful, and I was not, I was struggling with these things spiritually, but I was also becoming strengthened by constant time in prayer and worship and seeking God and calling out to Him and knowing that He's there, and He was leading me through this time very explicitly, and I'm so thankful for that. And whenever I was coming across people, I was sharing Jesus with them as well, because I knew what He had done for me, and suddenly I did know what the gospel is. And previous, when I was in high school trying to think, what's the gospel? How do I share the gospel? It was not really impacting my own life. It was a lot more, what would it be? A lot more head knowledge and systems that you would follow, and you do the right things. And I didn't know how to share that. And, I wouldn't be able to engage somebody in a conversation about who Jesus is from a heart level. I could engage with them from my mind and the things that I believed, but not from things like spiritually that I had experienced myself. And now I knew what Jesus was capable of doing because of what He did for me. And so I was able to engage with people in that way and tell them. Often I would talk to them about the parables. Like, they'd start telling me about something going on in their life, and I know now that the only way is Jesus, and because of my own experience trying everything else and trying every other solution. And so when somebody comes into my life and they've got problems and they're asking me for some sort of help, then all that I have to give them is Jesus. So I'll often use parables. I'll take the parables of Jesus and explain what Jesus is and how He can, come to them using different parables. Like, one of my favorite ones, recently anyways, is the woman at the well. I had this one lady come to me, and she was telling me that she was struggling with uncontrollable anger and these feelings that she had no control over. And she'd gone through some really difficult life experiences. And I had compassion for her, and I was like, I don't know how somebody could go through these things without Jesus. I don't know. So I told her about the story of the woman at the well, and I said, we keep on going to these external sources for satisfaction, and those sources will never satisfy. We have to keep going back every day, just like water. We get thirsty every day. And if you meet Jesus, He can put that, like a river inside of you, of that soul satisfaction, that you don't need to be going out searching around all over the place for satisfaction, because Jesus has put that directly in you, instead of dealing with, instead of looking for it outside. it's already dealt with at a heart level. So I had told her about that because that's really all that I have to offer. I don't have strategies for managing your anger. I just have Jesus, because he's the only thing that can truly, truly revolutionize you at a spiritual level. And that's the level that will impact everything. It's your spiritual level, and it's a spiritual illness that we're trying to fix externally. So I didn't have anything to give her except for that. And I don't know if she's going to take that, because her response to me at that time was that she wanted to try her native spirituality and getting into that, and maybe that would be a solution for the anger that the anger and overwhelming emotions that she's experiencing. And so I told her, well, you can try those. You can go and try it. But when it doesn't work, call out to Jesus. Because I am that certain that Jesus is the only way, and Jesus is the spiritual reality of who God is, and his incredible power to transform your entire character. That's just how sure I am of his power to do this. It's previously the gospel had been much more head knowledge and systems and things like this, and now it's you call out to Jesus and you ask for him, and he comes, and his spirit meets your spirit and completely changes you into somebody you don't even recognize anymore. And that's all that I know of what the gospel is. It's a real encounter, a real spiritual encounter, and it can't be controlled. You can cry out for it. And I've been watching a lot of testimonies of people who have encountered Jesus, and one common thing is that they do cry out for him, and some of them cry out for months and months. Some of them are just about to kill themselves, and they say, I'm going to kill myself by starving myself. And like it was a prisoner, and he felt so guilty that he was going to kill himself by starving himself. And it was in that time that he encountered Jesus. And you have to become so incredibly desperate, and that's my own story as well, that incredible desperation where I was fasting 3 days saying, God, I don't know what is going on in my life. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, and I really, really, really need you. And then he showed up. And that's all that I can say, that you call out for him and he shows up. And you just, it's not systems, and it's not rules, and it can't be controlled. It's the way that God chooses to reveal himself to his people. And it says, my sheep hear the sound of my voice, and I know them and they follow me. It's like his voice comes and you know it and you follow him. And that's really the only solution after working in social services, trying to create a program of solutions and trying to find solutions for myself. This is what I've come across, that it is Jesus. There's this old hymn, and it says, thy power and thine alone can change the leper's spots. The leopards, is it the leopards? Yeah, can change the leopard's spots and melt this heart of snow. So you cannot change yourself. You cannot melt your heart of your stony, cold heart. You have a stony, cold heart, and you have flaws in your character that you feel guilty for, and you can't change that. You can't change your guilt. You can't take it away. And you're going to keep on failing in all the ways that you wish that you wouldn't fail. And there's no way to work around that. It is the power of Jesus and him alone that's able to change your leopard's spots. It's like, what is a leopard known for? It's known for its spots. It's like everything that you're known for, you can't change it. Only Jesus can change it, and he does. Turns you into a completely different thing than you were previously. Yes, so this is the story of how I came to meet Jesus and all that was involved in it. Well, a lot of what was involved in it. So now I know that Jesus is a spiritual reality. I know that his spirit has to come and encounter your spirit. I know that he is Lord, and I know that he is beautiful, and I love him so much, and the more I know him, the more I love him. And it's not as though suddenly everything becomes easy after this. Even now, I have to keep on humbling myself and keep on coming back to him and saying my life is, still a mess. It still is. But I have something that other people don't have in their messes. And I just keep on coming back to a place of humility. And right now, in my mind, I was just pausing there because in my mind I was hearing kind of an accusation like you have no place making this video about Jesus because your life is such a disaster. And how can you tell people that Jesus can transform their lives if your life is such a mess? What kind of example are you? Anyways, that's the thought that just came into my mind. And I just say that life, I am a messed up person reaching out to messed up people with Jesus. Jesus said that those who are well don't need a doctor. It's the sick who need a doctor. So if you feel as though your life is okay and it's all going well, then you can't have Jesus. You can't have him because you don't need him. You don't think that you need him, so he's not going to be there for you. It's only those who are needing him that he shows up for. So it's also, you don't have to have it together. You just have to be humble, and you have to keep on coming to him. And in order to give a testimony of Jesus' power, I don't have to have a perfect life. It's not as though his power is seen in me having once again a husband and a house and 2 cars and a dog and a cat and my kids and all of the wholeness that I used to have. That's not how his power is seen. It's seen in like spiritual peace and the way that you now respond to difficult circumstances. Difficult circumstances are going to keep coming, but it's the new response that you have to them, the new heart that you have towards those circumstances, and the peace that you have in going through them. The circumstances are still going to be difficult, and you're going to have a new way to respond to those difficulties and a new source of strength. And that's what Jesus has meant to me and how he has changed my heart. And I don't know long term what it's going to mean in my life. It's now, what is it? January 2018. And this encounter with Jesus was July 2016. So it's a little over a year now. And I don't know what it's all going to look like. I mean, I've come from a place where I was being terrorized every night to a point that I couldn't turn out the lights and had my headphones in listening to worship music all night to a place, and I could not be in a house alone. If I was in, it felt as though I had to be in a house where other Christians were because it felt as though there was a release of the intense pressure on me when there was more than one Christian in the house. So I could not be in a house where there were no other Christians. And what else? I'm trying to remember back at that time. I mean, if I sat down and thought it through, I could remember a lot more. But yeah, couldn't sleep with the lights off. Had to have music on. Couldn't be in a place without more than one Christian in it. And actually, interestingly, this place that I was staying, there was once a conference and a bunch of people left the building for the weekend to go to this conference. So there was only about 2 or 3 of us. And during that night, when there was very few in the building, it's like there's a huge rattling all over the building, and it woke everybody up, and I could just feel the intensity so much more, like the weight of it gripping me so much stronger when there was less of us in the building. And now, so I've come from that point to here. Oh, interestingly, okay, I'm going to go back and tell a little bit more about that particular story. That morning when I woke up, I went up to do prayer with one of the other ladies who was there, and she was asking me about last night, and she didn't know this, but I hadn't slept all last night because of this experience. Like, it woke me up and then I couldn't sleep again. And she had also woken up, and I didn't know this, but everybody had woken up, and she also had thought that something might be going on spiritually that was odd. So that was a pretty intense moment of many intense moments. And that's where I've come from. I've come from that super intense, oppressed state. And if I did not have Jesus, I don't even know where I would be, because that wouldn't have lifted. There'd be no way to get out of that. There would have been no path out of that. It's like with the walking on the water analogy, that I would have gone under. I would have been taken under by the storm. And now I'm at a place where I am in a house by myself. I am able to be oppressed and recognize it for what it is, and yet, yeah, I can recognize it for what it is, and it's not taking me over and gripping me in the same way that it used to be able to grip me. And we'll see where it goes from here and what comes of it. Like, it's just been a little over a year now, and I'm not sure where it's all going to end up. But I do know that he has taken me so far from where I used to be that I'm not at all that same person. So I would be curious to know how this video has been meaningful to you, which parts of it were specifically most meaningful to you or stood out to you, and also, are there any parts that you would like more details on as you look back at the story that I've told you? Are there parts that I didn't really go into in very much in great depth, and you are curious about those? And do you have any questions for me regarding Jesus and faith in God and what the kingdom of God is? So I'd like to know if this video is meaningful to you, what the most meaningful part of it was, and if there's anything I can expand on more and explain more in depth, and if you have any questions about Jesus and the kingdom of God and this sort of stuff. So I'm going to finish off now with a prayer, and I hope to hear back from anybody that was moved by this. Jesus, I was putting this video off for so long, and I know that this is your story and it's your glory, that you have taken me from a place of hopelessness where I was going to be totally taken under and destroyed, and you have plucked me up and rescued me from that. And I just want to keep my eyes on you, and I pray for every person who has watched this video. I pray that you would also encounter them right where they're at in their storm, and that you would be for them everything that you've been for me and more, that you would encounter their spirit like you've encountered mine, and just give them that revelation in their heart. Just open the eyes of their hearts to be able to see you and know you. And thank you so much for coming to get me. I am so, so thankful for you. Amen.